Hello, and thank you for selecting my video. I've published my video online for you and anyone else who would like to hear my article about the Volvo Ailsa bus. I'd like to share my article about it with you. In this part B video of my Volvo Ailsa bus article, I will be pointing out some of the different model variants and generations of Ailsas which were produced over the years from 1973 to about 1985. The final part C will be posted up online later. In this part, some of the rarer Ailsa examples will be shown. Models such as the Van Huel McCardle bodied Mark I Volvo Ailsa and the one and only low height Volvo Ailsa ever built. Okay, this is a photograph that I've taken during the show bus down at Doncaster in England. This was a lineup that we did somewhere during that time, and this clearly shows a Mark II Volvo Ailsa WTS 273T. That's an exTayside Mark II Volvo Ailsa. Next to it is a Mark I. Now you can see the windscreens, the differences in the height. The windscreen on the Mark II was the cab was higher, and it had a different instrument panel in it as well. Whereas the Mark I's also had, not only was the windscreen lower, it had angular lights, whereas the Mark II upwards had the rectangle lights. Now this one here is an interesting one. It was a one of a kind. It was originally RTO1R. At some point in its life it was changed to TRR814R. Now this has been very well preserved. All these buses have been very well preserved, and you can see the height difference. This was the only Ailsa that was low height for low bridges, basically. But they didn't make any more, so that was a one-off experiment. But the Ailsas are normally 14 foot 8, 14 foot 10, thereabouts. But this one here, the low height one, was only about 13.8 or something, or 13.5 feet. So there was a foot less, basically, to get under low bridges. And there was a lot of mechanical, well, the floor was really, there was all sorts of anomalies. It was quite complex. So they didn't make any more. So, and that's the West Midlands ones as well. In fact, I'll change that photo. Yeah, this is just another view. That's the two West Midland ones. I think this is a pre-production, an NVEG. That's the JLV 738P, and it's got AV1, and that's a Mark III Volvo Ailsa with 2 doors. This is just a rear view of the Ailsas, and you could clearly tell the height difference with the low floor, and they had to even put the rear emergency door in this position. You know, it was a very, very, very complex. It was a one of a kind, very unusual, but it's lucky to be preserved because it is, as I say, it's just the one. It's a special one. This is a V1. This is the Mark III. It was originally new for London transport, I think. But this has got the Alexander RV type bodywork on it. All the others were Alexander AV types. This is the RV type bodywork on it, in the 2-door formation. I took this picture when we were making our way to Donington, I think, for the 2016 show bus. But we stopped off at services and we lined up all the buses, and you can see that the West Midlands has got the openings for the top front window. The JLV 738B's got the flat windscreens, driver windscreen, slightly flatter setup. The Tayside ones, this is more like what the Tayside ones had. It was bet style windscreen, I think. Bet, I think it is. They're rounded anyway, and more of a curve at the top, whereas this is flatter. And that's the low floor. That's what the front of the low floor looks like. And this is just another view of the buses here. You can see the bar, the grab bar for the conductors. Tayside had them on their LES and NSP batch of Mark 1s. The SSN batch didn't have that. And it's just another view of the buses here. West Midlands went for this hopper type design, whereas the Tayside ones were just one piece. Now, I took this photograph at Bridgeton in Glasgow on one of their opening days. And this shows a picture of a Volvo Ailsa Mark III with the Alexander RV type bodywork. It's got the Voith transmission in it. Now this next to it, that's a Volvo Ailsa Mark I, but it's got a different. It's an Alexander bodywork, but it's a different. There's only a few of them like this. It's got this type of bodywork. Because the majority of the Mark 1s were like the Alexander AV type, like this. But this is, I don't have a lot of knowledge on these ones. But it's quite unique. There were Ailsa's Mark 1s. This is MGE 103B. It's got this dome-like setup on it. Like that of the Atlanteans and Fleetliners. Similar sort of window. I mean, that's the Lothian Fleetliners. Lothian Atlanteans. It was unusual to see an Ailsa like that. There's not many of them like that. I think it was just Strathclyde, I think it was the only company that ran that type, to my knowledge. So I took this picture of A1. It's the Volvo Ailsa Mark III, and it shows the standard length. The Ailsa Mark IIIs with the Alexander RV type bodies were about 32 feet long, and this is how the window layout was like on them. And these have the air sac suspensions. Now, in comparison, the ones that Tayside had, the HSR 36 batch, were different. I'll show you a picture of that. Yeah, the HSR batch, this is a picture of HSR 43X from the HSR 36X, the HSR 50X batch of Tayside buses. Obviously, this is shown it whilst it was with its new owner, Pride of the Clyde. I took this in the year 2000. It was me and a friend. We arranged to get this bus brought back to Dundee for a day, and we were taking photographs. And this is at the Whitfield Shopping Centre, and I took this photo, and it will show you the difference in the length. These were the only buses that had the Alexander RV type bodywork that were on the Ailsas with the extra bay at the back. These were about 33 feet long, 33 and a half feet long. These were a bit longer. And they were the only batch, to my knowledge, that had leaf spring suspensions on all of the axles. And they came new with dark brown seats. I'll show you a picture of that next. So this is a photo I taken showing the dark brown seats that they were built with. Although I took this in 1991, I think, around about 1991. At that time, they were taking the brown seats out of them. and replacing them with the orange maquette seats. But it was done in a kind of phased method, where they were leaving the seat backs and doing the cushions. This is actually at the point where they took away the cushions. Originally they were brown as well. It just looked like it was the same materials what was on the Mark I Volvo Ailsas. Same type of seat, but only they were dark brown. And this one here, this is actually a photograph of HSR 39X. I'd taken this in, I think it was 1992 actually. And at that time it was converted to one door. At that time, it was changed about a year or so before. About 1990 they started changing them from the two door to one door, so the passengers got on and off at the front door, as opposed to coming on at the front and leaving the bus in the middle door. And they were done professionally. Some of the later in the 90s, the Mark IIs and that, they just put a barrier over some of them they left the door in, but just barrier it up. So now this is just a photograph of me posing in front of bus HSR 41X. It's an exTayside bus. At this point, it's with its new owner, Prentice Westwood, which is in the Livingston area, and I arranged to get a run on that bus. And I actually had a wee short drive around the industrial estate. But this HSR 41X of the batch of 36 to 50 was the only one that had this mirror in the top front window. It was unique to that bus. I always knew that when 41 was, before I saw the fleet number, because of that mirror. And it's got they came with the dark brown seats as well. Now this is just another photograph of me standing posing in front of one of my favourite buses of all. Is the HSR 46X. It's one of the favourite batch of buses, which is 36 to 50 fleet. HSR 36X to HSR 50X. I was going to point out that Ailsas, the emergency engine stop was situated right there, which is close to the engine, and the vents there was for the induction, the air filter that sucked the air in, and then into the through the piping, through the donut and into the turbocharger, and then into the engine. The other vent was for the heater. That was for the demisters. Because the heater matrices were under the staircase, on some of them anyway. Not all Ailsas had that. Some of them had them under the seats upstairs and everything, but a lot of them had them under the staircase. And that's what these vents were for. That was for the main engine vent, and the smaller ones was for the sucking air in for the heating matrix, and then pushed through the pipes to demist the windows, etc. And of course, being a grill as well, the Ailsa, rather the grill at the front came up. You had the power steering reservoir in there. You could top that up. You could check engine oil and screen wash by access, by lifting up that grill. Now this is a photograph I'd taken of a very unique Mark II Volvo Ailsa. It's an exTayside WTS276T. It's very unique in the fact that it's a Mark II Volvo Ailsa with a Mark III driveline in it. So it's got a Mark III engine transmission. It sounds like it's basically a Mark III engine and a Mark II bus, but it still retains its original Mark II Hamworthy rear axle. And the sound of this bus is very unique, because you could hear a Mark III engine and a Mark II rear axle. Very, very unique bus. Now this bus is fully preserved, and I took this photograph when it was going to a bus rally. And it's a very well looked after bus. Very unique. In fact, this bus went to Helsinki in 1979 to do a display. It was going to be demonstrating Volvo buses in Finland, Helsinki in Finland. and it done that from through the summer of 1979. In fact, this has actually got a plaque. Inside this bus, there's a plaque just near the staircase to show that it had been there as a demonstrator. So this bus next to it, this is the open topper bus, fleet number 300, Tayside bus, or exTayside bus. Both these buses are fully preserved. It's WTS 272T. This was originally part of a batch of 6, the very first Mark IIs that Tayside owned. They bought them in 1979. The WTS 271T to WTS 276T were the first Mark IIs that Dundee Tayside buses bought. And after that, they went on to V-Reg Mark IIs. The CSL fleet, CSL 601V to CSL 620V, and that was March 1980. And then they bought a batch of 15, the DSP 921V to DSP 935V, and they were bought and put in service around June 1980. But you could tell the 276 that was unique, that it had this coolant pipe. Always seemed to have protruded out from the side. Possibly because it's got a Mark III engine in it, it's maybe something to do with that. But it was only one out of that, of all the fleet that Tayside had. It was only one that had that sticking out of it. Its sister bus 272 was made into an open topper in the early 80s. And the other sister bus to 271, WTS 271T, that was made into a driver training bus at some point in the 80s as well. This is just another photograph that I'd taken of it. This was when it was en route to a rally, a bus rally. And we were stopping off at services. Now this is a photograph I'd taken inside 276. I know it's a wee bit out of focus, but it's the best I could have done. I didn't plan on, as I say, putting in a lot of these. All these photos I've taken were taken years back, before I even made any videos, so it's the best that I've got. The Mark III engine, this Mark II bus having a Mark III engine in it, you could see that the transmission setup, it's got this floor hatch that's one piece for the Voith transmission. Now all the SCG boxes, the Mark 1s and Mark 2s that had their original engines, that was a two-piece setup. There was two hatches. So this was always unique than having a one-piece hatch. You always knew that it was 276. But you had to tell anyway by the sound, because it was so unique, you'd tell right away. The Voith transmission is very distinctive in sound. And the plaque to show that it had been to Helsinki in Finland as a Volvo bus demonstrator is situated on this bulkhead. But unfortunately, I didn't get a picture of that at this stage. I've got one somewhere, but I'll put that up later. Now this is a photograph that I taken during September 1990 down at the Tayside bus opening day. And it's showing a picture of an East Lancs bodied Volvo Ailsa Mark III. It's fleet numbered 77, registered A77 SSP, part of the A76 SSP to A85 SSP batch. And it's a much clearer example of an East Lancs body. And these buses were the only Mark III Ailsas that had an extra bit. They were long, they were 33.5 feet long. And they had air sac suspension as well. Voith transmission. Its sister bus 62, that I showed you earlier, the chassis in that was virtually the same, identical. It was just the 61 to 75 batch, the OSN 861Y to OSN 875Y. That batch came in March 1983. The A76 SSP, the A85 SSP batch, the 76 to 85 batch came in December 1983. I got that information from research that I done. Tayside bus fleet lists, which I still have. So this is an example, anyway, of East Lights body. It's a very flat front on it. Now this is going back to a photo that I taken of bus 62, just to highlight the top back window. It was a very big oval on it. Now this isn't the best example, obviously being a scrap bus, but I didn't take photographs back in the for putting online, so I could only show you what I've got at the moment. And this is just to show you an example of what the top back window looked like. That's just a photo showing you what the bottom back window looks like. Unfortunately, I can only show you a scrap bus. There weren't many of these East Lights. There was only 25 to my knowledge. There aren't many left. I've not got many photos, so I could only just... Unfortunately, I've got to show you what I've got. And this is what I've got, and then it's a scrap bus, but it still gives you an idea where the number plate was. I mean, this has been got out and everything, but I had a much thinner sort of pillars and a thinner side to it. This is just the near side. Now it shows it shows you the bus in a one-door form. Originally they came new as two doors, and Tayside professionally removed them and converted it to a one-door. And that was done towards maybe the early 90s, around about 1990. Now this is a much better picture. This was taken, I took this picture during the September 1990 bus opening day, Tayside. And it shows, I can't remember what fleet number it was, but it was one out of the 61 to 85 batch. It's one of the East Lights bodied Mark III Volvo Ailsas, and it shows you the interior. The silver window seals as well, and metal window seals, silver. Well, I had a thinner rubber with decorative silver window seal, as opposed to big thick rubber gaskets that are used on the Alexander bodyworks. And this one is still, well, this was around about the time they were making them one door, but this particular one still had its two doors, and you could tell by you could see the bulkhead. And it had a bar that went down at an angle like that on East Lights. The Alexander ones, it came down at a 90-degree angle. It came down like that. But on the East Lights, it had a more of a slope to it. Yeah. I can't remember the fleet number of that one, but it was one out of that batch, and it had thicker windows. Light. They had bigger lights, thicker light covers on them, compared to the Northern Kilties and Alexander ones, AV type. It was the HSR batch that had the full diffusers that were covered, even covered the tube. But on these, the tube was still exposed, but just had a thicker light. The East Lights chose a thicker, a bigger light, whereas all the others were flush. There was a thinner light on them. This is going by my knowledge from what I remember in my research. And I remember these used to rattle about a lot when they went over bumps with the anti-roll bar, that I now know was the probable cause for that. And as when they were idling, there was a lot of pinking sound. That would be the prop shaft pinking, because it's a long prop shaft. They were known for that. Mark IIIs were known for that. As I said earlier, the voice transmission, whether it was in gear or in neutral, the prop shaft was always turning, and it was always charging your batteries as well. Whereas on the SCG gearboxes on Mark 1s and Mark 2s, it only charged the battery when it was in neutral, because as soon as the driver put it in gear, it'd lock the gears, the brake bands would lock the gear, and this whole drive shaft wouldn't be turning. The engine would be turning and slipping. The slippage would be accommodated through the fluid coupling at the front. bolted onto the flywheel. So this is just another picture that I've taken inside bus 62. Unfortunately, I've got photographs of lots of them somewhere, but I don't know if I've got better pictures inside the East Lancs bodies. This is all I've got at the moment, and I've got to watch for time spent on this, and this is the best I could put up to give you an example as to what the top front window looked like on the East Lanc bodied Volvo Ailsa Mark IIIs for Tayside. Now the top front window on the East Lancs had a full gasket, rubber, going right along it. And the side windows were this thin aluminium dress set up here, and a thinner rubber for holding the windows in. And it was a very flat front on it. And this was covered, and that was where the destination blind was. Now this is a picture I taken during 1993. It's showing a Volvo Ailsa Mark III with the Northern Counties bodywork on it. And that's OSN 855Y, part of the 51 to 60 fleet for the Tayside buses. And there was only 10 of them that Tayside bought. And it shows basically what the Northern Counties version looked like. This one actually has had its centre door removed, and it was made into a one door. There was only one left. I think it retained its original door, and that was 52, I think. Bus 52. All they done there is they didn't remove it professionally. They just put a barrier over it and kept it, which is good for us, the bus restoration group, because it leaves bus when they do, like say the Mark 1s, 126 and that, they just put basically a bar over it, barriered it, and which makes it, as I say, much easier for us to have the centre door back in operation. But when they do it professionally, it's a massive job to put it back. That's an East Lancs bodied example of a Volvo Ailsa back there. I took this photograph inside the Northern Counties bodywork to give you an idea of what it looks like inside, and it had its centre door removed as well. Again, like the East Lancs, it's got a metal sort of window seal with a thin rubber, but they were a wee bit thicker than East Lancs, as opposed to the Alexanders, where they're fully gasketed. The lights, as I was saying, in the East Lancs bodyworks, they had a thicker, bigger light, whereas well, not so much bigger, but just a thicker cover. Whereas all the other buses were thinner, more of a flush, apart from 36 to 50, the HSR batch, which had a full diffuser in it. And these came new in April 1983 and had the orange fabric seats for Tayside buses. This is just another view of inside. I can't remember which fleet number it was, but it was one out of the 51 to 60 batch, the Northern Counties. Now, there were other bus companies around the UK that ran Northern Counties bodied Ailsas. I think there was some in Cardiff. I'm not overly genned up with them. And the Ailsas that I'm talking about in this video, because I've lived in Dundee all my life and more familiar with the Tayside ones, so I tend to have I've got a much more in-depth knowledge of the Tayside Ailsas and much more familiar with them. So I tend to use them as a reference as regarding talking about Volvo Ailsas. Now this is a good photograph that I taken in the early 90s, probably 1993 or something, around about then. And it shows a great example because you've got an Alexander RV type bodied Volvo Ailsa, which is bus 48. These are my favourites by a long shot. That batch of bus. Then you've got the Northern Counties bodywork. I think that's bus 58. It's got the window. I think at this stage, 1983, all the Tayside bus fleet were one door, and it's got a big thick vent there. So that's the Northern Counties, and then here on the left, I think that's 72, an East Lancs bodied Volvo Ailsa Mark III, and you could tell that you could just see what they compare like. The Mark IIIs have air sac suspension in them, and these came with orange fabric seats. These, however, had solid leaf spring suspensions in them, and they have Mark III engines in them. This is a photograph that I taken around about the later part of 2001, when they sold off, then Tayside sold off the Ailsas. Well, it was actually, by this stage, it was National Express that owned them. They owned Tayside from 1997, but these were sold. This was sold off first. In fact, these survived on, the 36 to 50 batch survived on to 1999 before they were sold off from Dundee. But this is at Had's coaches, if I remember correctly, and this shows an example of OSN 855Y bus 55, a Northern Counties bodied Mark III Volvo Ailsa, and it's next. It's a between 36, it's SR36X Alexander RV type bodywork, and another one of the 36 to 50 batch. I can't remember which one off the top of my head. I can't see the fleet number, but I took it. I can't remember, but it's one of the 36 to 50 batch, and it's this photograph that I've taken shows you a great example of the variant bodies used on Ailsas. And of course, this being the Northern County. Yep. Now, this photograph I taken at Bridgeton in Glasgow, the Bridgeton opening day, and this shows actually a very unique type of bus. It's a Volvo Ailsa with a Van Hool bodywork on it, a Van Hool body, and looking at it, it looks like a Bodgen Mark III or an Alexander RV type body, but it's not. It's a Mark I. Now, I'm not overly genned up with these. They were Yorkshire had quite a few, Sheffield I think, and A1 services. There was P-Regs as well, but they were new in 1976. This one, an R-Veg, I think this was 1976 as well. There was two of them I think, but it shows you the difference in the bodyworks anyway, compared to the normal Alexander bodywork used on Mark I Volvo Ailsas. It's a very unique. It looks really modern. It looks like an Alexander RV type bodywork actually when you see it. It's so square compared to the round features that you see on an AV type, Alexander AV type body. This particular one, in fact, I think all the Van Hool body Mark I Volvo Ailsas had the well-known squeal that the Mark I's produced. Like I said on the video earlier, that was caused by the toothed alternator belt driven off the prop shaft input to the SEG gearbox, and this batch of buses had that, I believe. The Van Hools had that. In fact, I've been inside it, and it wasn't as loud, but it did have originally the toothed belt for the alternator. This is just an inside shot that I taken of the Van Hool body Mark I Volvo Ailsa. I took this, I think, at Lathamond Bus Museum opening day. You can see that it's got brown seats in it. It's just like, it looks like an Alexander RV type body, size of windows, the depth and length of the windows, and just the way that it looks inside. Although the roofing does have the radius of the roof is similar to that of the Alexander RV type body, but it has the turns. It comes down at an angle like that, but on the Alexander RV it comes up more of a straight angle, where this is more of a rounded angle. It's a very interesting design. I think they were steel bodies as well. They're aluminium panels, and I think the framework was steel. And I think they suffered rust problems, being steel rusts, whereas aluminium just oxidises, but tends to last longer. Now, I took this photograph. This is going back to a photograph I'd taken of V1. This is the Mark III Volvo Ailsa with the Alexander RV type bodywork, the London one. It just shows you the way the roof setup is, the cornices, big thick gasket windows, and you could see the way that this is what the RV types had, this sort of finish. This has got 2 doors, it's got the interior bulkhead with the windows in it, and that's very similar to what the HSR batch had, the Tayside HSR 36X to HSR 50X, 36 to 50 fleet batch had in Dundee. They looked, the colour scheme's different, but the general layout is very similar in the way the doors are, although the HSRs were slightly longer. This is just a close-up of the exit door and the way the bar comes down like this. The East Lancs one came down at a shallower angle, whereas all the Alexanders not had this sort of angle. And I think the Northern Counties had that as well. But the Mark 1s didn't have this. The Tayside Mark 1s, the S's and the P's and the R edges just had a bar there and a bar there. And I think it was until, oh wait a minute, it was maybe the S's that had, maybe the S's were the first that had that. And it was just the P's and the R's that just had another bar that went up and didn't have that. But I know that that this was certainly from at least T-Reg, or at the very S-Reg upwards, with Tayside. Yeah, something like that. That's just another view of the 2-door setup on the Alexander RV type bodywork Mark III for London V1. It's just another view of it. This is the photograph that I taken, I think it was in the year 2000. It was at the T in the Park, I think it was around about Kinross. They used a lot of buses for that event. So me and a friend were bus spotting, as it was called, and there was lots to choose from. And me being an Ailsa fan, had to get this. And it's showing a picture of HSF 95X. Fleet number 1095. I'm not overly familiar with the other companies, and just more familiar with the Tayside ones, but this is certainly a Mark III Ailsa, and I've got another picture of that. Yeah, this is just another view of the side of it, and you can see that the standard length of the Mark IIIs, the RV type bodies, were shorter than the 36 to 50 batch that Tayside had. They were longer, and these ones here had the air sac suspensions, and the 36 to 50 batch had the spring suspension. And this is another thing, there's various companies had this specified, this trapezium shaped destination blind. Tayside never had anything like that, they always had a rectangular, but this is more a bodywork exercise rather than anything to do with the chassis. Yeah. Going back to this again, a feature on the Ailsas, some of them you could specify fog lights on the front. Now the Tayside ones, the LES batch, didn't have this provision. Their lights just came along to there wasn't a provision for it, but I think from the NSP batch upwards they started making this a little bit here for fog lights, you know, rural driving and that in the country. But being a city bus, it was never normally used. Although the provision was there, you could fit them, retrofit them, I guess. This is a feature on all Ailsas. from probably about 76 or something, 1976. Yeah, I could be wrong on the dates, but this one here's got them specified. The front fog lights. But none of the Dundee Tayside buses had any of these fitted whilst they were doing service in Dundee, being a city bus and that. But the LAS batch I know didn't have any provisions for that. It wasn't until the NSP batch that allowed the provision for the front fog lights. I don't know about other bus companies, but with Tayside anyway, I know that. Now this is just a photograph that I taken down at on the west coast of Scotland with the A1 bus service. This is an exTayside NSP 331R Volvo Ailsa Mark 1 with Alexander AV type bodywork, and it's working on one of the I can't remember what route I went on it. I can't remember the route, but it was probably heading for a Drossen or something. But it shows the bar rail for the original conductors, although I don't think conductors were used on them, but they were there. The bar was fitted on the NSP batch. From after the NSP batch, there was no more of that. I never said earlier about the fog lights. These were the first batch that had the provisions for this. The LASs had a bar that just went along there, and there was a bump rubber that went along, right along there. This beading, but from the NSPs were the first that didn't have this rubber. It was just beading aluminium strap panelling. The number plates moved as well. This was originally down there when it was with Tayside. This A1 that did that, and this ventilation thing here, the NSPs and the LASs, when they came new in 1976, they did not have this. That was added later, probably towards maybe in 1977, just shortly after they were bought. That was to accommodate more ventilation for the driver, because this window in the cab wasn't an opening window. That was just one piece, and there was no vent there, so it would be really warm in the summer. So probably by summer '77, they would have made that an opening window and fitted this vent. But the S-Regs, the SSN 236S, the SSN 255S. In fact, all the buses had a vent fitted as standard. It was a black gauze-like vent. Right up until the first Mark IIs, which were the WTS 271T to WTS 276T, they had a blank plate, because at this stage the ventilation was improved anyway, and they didn't need to, but they just left the provision. It was a blank plate. In fact, I'll show you that photo. Yeah, going back to the 276 and 272, this is the blank plate. It's just a blank, and I'll show you what the gauze looks like on the S's and T-Regs, the Mark 1.5s and the S-Reg. Yeah, this is a picture of 266, the Mark 1.5. The S-Regs had this setup. It's just a black gauze. That's what it looked like. So from SSN 236S to basically WTS 270T, all came with that. And then the V-Regs, all Mark IIs didn't need that. The V-Regs didn't have any of this. There was just nothing there on any of the DSP fleet or CSL fleet. And none of the East Lancs or Northern Counties bodies had them neither. And neither did the Alexander RV type bodied Ailsas 36 to 50. They didn't need that. Or didn't have them anyway. I took this photograph, by the way, over the Tayside pit. You could just make out the West Midlands, and I think it was about the year 2000. And I think it was on getting serviced or something, but I had the privilege to get under it and photograph it. This is just a view of inside HSR 47X during the September 1990 opening day. I took this photograph showing the top front window and just the interior layout. Now, 47, I mean, the seat backs on the 36 to 50 fleet were normally this brick effect, but 47 was the only one that had dark backing effect. That was due to possible vandals maybe, but it was the only one that had the majority of it having this mixed effect. But it's not the best example here, but that was a kind of brick effect on the seat backs, but I could maybe show you a better picture of that later. You could tell that you could see the thicker gaskets on the windows in comparison to the East Lancs bodies and the Northern Counties. But it's got a nice looking big top front window. I mean, these were my favourite of all buses. That particular batch, there's a lot of that batch was special to me anyway, the 36 to 50 batch. I remember it when I was very young. I grew up with them, and there's a lot of stories that mean a lot to me, but it'd be too long to go on at this video. But yes, it was just showing you the interior of the upper deck looking forward on the Alexander RV type body on a Volvo Ailsa chassis, and that's HSR 47X in September 1990. And I think at that point it had one door. If I remember, it was. And another thing, when they made them one door, this batch, these diffusers on the 36 to 50 batch, the diffusers were all one piece. They were all one piece diffusers. But when they made it a one door, they cut the diffusers and made it like this. So you just had the ends and the tube was exposed. I don't know why they done that, but it was done at the same time that it was made one door. So if you see this, you know it's been converted to one door, with the exception of HSR 50X. That was the only one that retained its original full diffuser. It went to one door, but it kept the full diffusers. However, the bus club that I'm with, we have bus HSR 46X, and we have added the full diffusers back on again to it. I'll see if I could show you a photo of that next. No, I can't find one at the moment, but you'll see it on the videos. That's all footage of 46 when it's been moved, and you'll see the diffusers on it if you watch the video. This is a view looking towards the back of HSR 39X. I took this photograph during 1992. I remember taking this one at the winter of 1992, and that was at that time. It wasn't long converted into one door, and it was at the same time they started mixing the seats about. Originally they were all dark brown, and the cushions that you sat on were matching. They were also dark brown, but the rows at the back were really hard black seats, like fiberglass or something, plastic. That was to prevent vandalism. But this is a mixture, all this mixture of orange and brown that was done towards, they started doing this in the early 1990s to that batch. But that's the layout anyway of what it looks like on HSR Volvo Ailsa Alexander RV type body HSR 39X. And that was, from memory, it was December 1992 I take it, that one. Again, that's another photograph that I've taken of HSR 39X. This is a downstairs photograph, winter 1992. It's just showing you the way that the seat layout is. Another thing, when they made this at a one-door bus from a two-door, when I went to one door, they added this extra seat downstairs. Originally, this would have been where the door was, and they've taken away. They put another seat there as well, a side seat facing that way, a single seat. So they put 3 seats downstairs, and they've taken away 3 seats from upstairs at the front near side, and that was to balance out the weight as regarding the front axle loading. Basically, it was to prevent the front axle being overloaded. So they took 3 passengers up. They've taken away 3 passenger seats from upstairs and relocated it towards the centre of the middle of the lower deck for the weight distribution reasons. And you can see the hatch. This had a Volvo straight axle, rear axle in it, and this here, Volvo Ailsas with the Volvo straight axle, had this clearance, this hatch, this was to allow clearance for the differential in the axle for the movement of the suspension. If that weren't there, it would burst right through the floor. But on the Mark 1's Hamworthy rear axle, it was low floor. Therefore, there wasn't a necessary to have this, because it was the drop centre axle was provided enough clearance for the diff to not hit the floor. And you could see the hatches as well for the battery boxes. The Ailsas had them there. This is to distribute the weight along the chassis. That's the gearbox cover. So the big heavy 45 diesel tank and batteries, the big heavy lead acid batteries, which were very heavy, they're heavy current, placed them right at the back to take away the weight off the front axle. Because the engine being at the front put a lot of weight, and the fact that the engine was on the overhang would load the front axle up even more, because it's right over the axle. So they had to put weight right at the back to distribute the weight. Likewise with the transmission. Instead of, normally the transmissions are bolted right up against the engine, but on an Ailsa, and I think even actually on backloader buses, the backloaders, they had their engines at the front as well, but they were known as half cabs. Like the Routemaster, for example, I'm sure their transmissions were remote as well for weight distribution purposes. I've taken this photograph of the view showing the front lower deck on the HSR 43X after it was changed, well after it was changed to a one door formation. As you can see, it's been professionally removed, and that's the other clue, is that the light diffusers were cut. That there is what East Lancs bodies have for their lights. They were quite chunky, but yet the tube was still exposed, whereas they were originally covered over. But it's a nice bodywork, and the brick effect was on the seat backs on the HSRs. This is what they look like. This was always there since these buses. When it had the brown seats, it still had that. Although this has got this kind of bluish seat, towards the later part of the 1990s, I think 1995 upwards, the orange maquette were taken out. I mean, this originally had dark brown seats in it, up to about 1990, probably about 1990, when they made it one door. And then this 43, HSR 43X, then had orange maquette seats fitted at the same time it was made one door. And that lasted up to about, I think, 1995. And then Tayside started taking the maquette seats out and fitting this kind of blue type seat, vinyl type. It's not the same blue as what was used on the Mark 1 and Mark 2 Ailsas in the Tayside fleet, but it was a different type of material. But this is what the interior looks like anyway. When you compare it to the V1, it looks very similar sort of layout. So this is another photograph I've taken of HSR 43X on that day when it came back to Dundee, and it's showing another feature that's common with all Ailsas, is the driver cab door on the offside and the steps to get in, because obviously the engine being there, this is no other option. There are other buses around the world. I think China had a Leyland Victor or something that shared a similar concept to a Volvo Ailsa. Had a Gardner engine at the front. I don't know an awful lot about it, but Lathaman Bus Museum is home. That bus is housed at the Lathaman Bus Museum in Scotland, near Dunfermline. They have opening days when they can, and that's where that one's housed. The Volvo Ailsa concept is not the first of its kind. Going back in the late 1950s, there was another company called Guy, and they tried to build something like an Ailsa, but having the engine at the front. They tried putting a Gardner engine at the front overhang, and they tried to make it have this formation, but it wasn't successful, so nothing was tried since about 1960. Nothing was tried like that until the Ailsa came along in 1973, and that was a success. Of course, before the Ailsa, the front engine buses were backloaders and half cabs, although not all the buses that had engines at the front were backloaders, but there were half cabs that had the engine bonnet was there, and the entrance could have been set further back, but there was no forward entrance like this. There was nothing like the flush front of an Ailsa. There was none of that until the Ailsa came along in 1973, certainly for the UK, to my knowledge. As I say, there's that Leyland Victor, and which is similar, but it's totally different. The axles are all in different. It's a different place. Shorter overhangs and that, and the entrance is extremely narrow on this Leyland Victor. It's built for China. It's got like offset seats. It's got like a row of 3 on one side and 2 on the other. It's not a straightforward looking design. But to my knowledge, there was nothing like that on sale in Britain. For as far as buses were concerned, it was just the Volvo Ailsa looked like. It was only the Volvo Ailsa that had this concept. Having the engine at the front, flat front, the entrance ahead of the axle, and basically there was another. Yeah, I was going to try and say there was another bus, a London one, Ailsa, similar to this. I think it was V3 or something. It had 3 doors, and sure there was one on this corner, this offside corner, and not overly genned up with it, but it was a Mark III Volvo Ailsa with an Alexander RV type bodywork, and then sure it was the 3-door version. Being London, of course, famous for the London Routemaster bus, coming off and on at the back was part of their sort of culture. It was unique to, well, not unique, but London seemed to hold on to their Routemasters for a very long time. I wish that Scotland would have done the same with the Ailsa, because the London Routemaster bus was designed for London. It was part of London heritage. The Volvo Ailsa was designed in Scotland, and most of them had Alexander bodyworks, which was also a Scottish factory based in Falkirk. So the Ailsa was basically, if it had an Alexander bodywork on it, was fully Scottish, and would have been good for this part of the Scottish heritage if they'd at least kept them for as long as they did with the Routemaster, because Dundee was probably the most, well, it had its biggest fleet. The fleet was comprised, or a very high percentage, of Volvo Ailsas. So it would have been, I would have liked to have thought that would have been the most likely candidate to have Ailsas running well into the 21st century. Of course, I live in Dundee, and I'd very much like to see Ailsas, and now that I work on the buses, I'd be very happy to drive them. Well, let's just dream on. Anyway, I'll move on to the next part of the main video for you. These are photographs I'm taking, except for the ones I'm in. Photos of exTayside Alexander RV type bodywork. These RV type bodyworked Alexander bodies were on Volvo Ailsa chassis with the leaf spring suspension, and originally they came with dark brown vinyl seats, similar to that of the Mark I Tayside AV type Alexander bodies, but they were blue seats instead. This is a picture I taken of a Van Hool McArdled bodied Mark I Volvo Ailsa. This is a photograph I taken of an exTayside Alexander AV type bodywork on a Volvo Ailsa Mark I chassis. I took this photograph of the one and only low height Volvo Ailsa Alexander bodied Mark I. I took these photographs of exTayside Volvo Ailsa Mark II on an Alexander AV type bodywork. I took this picture of the Mark II open topper WTS 272T on an Alexander AV type bodywork exTayside bus. I took these photos of a rare Mark II Volvo Ailsa example. This one has got a Mark III engine fitted to it, but it still retains its original Hamworthy rear axle, Mark II rear axle. It's an Alexander AV type bodywork, exTayside bus. This Mark II Ailsa with the Mark III engine conversion, this is registered WTS 276T. These are photos I've taken showing examples of Volvo Ailsa Mark IIIs with Alexander RV type bodywork. These have air sac suspensions fitted. I've taken these pictures showing examples of the Northern Counties bodied Volvo Ailsa Mark IIIs. The bus in the centre is the Northern Counties bodied one. Seen here are photos I've taken showing examples of the East Lancs bodywork fitted to the Mark III Volvo Ailsa chassis. These are exTayside buses. Like the Northern Counties bodied Mark III Volvo Ailsas, these East Lancs Mark III Volvo Ailsas also had air sac suspensions fitted. That's it for this part. In the final part C, video footage I've taken inside various Volvo Ailsas whilst they were being driven will be shown. These will include the Mark I, Mark II and Mark III Ailsas. It will also include some of the rare Volvo Ailsas as well. All the different engine sounds will be played. I will post the final part C online in due course. I hope you enjoyed my video, and if you wish, you could comment, like, or subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.